The whole restaurant froze. The forks against plates stopped. Even the music playing softly from the speakers seemed to get quieter. Everyone turned to stare. By the entrance stood two people who looked completely out of place. One was an older man, probably in his late 50s, with messy gray hair sticking out under a worn-out cap. He wore a wrinkled brown jacket with patches on the elbows, baggy jeans that sagged a little at the knees, and old sneakers so dusty you could barely tell their color. His face had a kind smile but tired eyes. The other was a young man, about 24, tall, with broad shoulders and a handsome face that seemed almost too good for the scruffy hoodie and faded jeans he was wearing. His hands fidgeted nervously in his pockets. People whispered under their breaths. Did they get lost? They definitely don't belong here. Maybe they're looking for the kitchen door. The whispers got louder as the two men stepped forward toward the host's stand. But what nobody in that fancy, glittery restaurant knew was that the older man was Thomas Blake, a millionaire with more money than half the people in the room combined. And the younger man was his son, Ethan Blake, heir to an empire built on real estate, tech companies, and even a small airline. Yet tonight, their designer suits were hanging in the closet at home. Tonight, their luxury cars were parked far, far away. Tonight, they were just two ordinary guys. Thomas had insisted on it. If you want to find a good woman, son, she needs to love you for you, not for the money, he had said that morning, handing Ethan a pair of old sneakers with a chuckle. We're going undercover. And so here they were, feeling every judgmental eye in the room drilling into their backs. The hostess at the stand, a young woman with a sharp bob haircut and bright red lipstick, gave them a plastic smile. She barely hid her disgust as she stared at Thomas's torn jacket and Ethan's scuffed-up shoes. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice a little too loud and slow, like she thought they couldn't understand English. Thomas smiled warmly, as if he didn't notice her rudeness. "We have a reservation," he said calmly. "Blake. Private room." The hostess blinked, her fake smile flickering for a second. She quickly tapped her long pink nails against the computer screen. Her eyebrows shot up. "Reservation under Blake. Private room. VIP treatment. Already paid in full, including a massive tip." She swallowed hard, her cheeks turning a little pink. "Right this way," she muttered, grabbing two menus and leading them into the dining area. As Thomas and Ethan followed her, the stares didn't stop. Some people laughed quietly. Some shook their heads. Others simply turned away, pretending not to notice, but everyone was thinking the same thing. How did they get in here? Thomas leaned down to his son and whispered. "Stay strong. We're about to find out what kind of person she really is." Ethan nodded, but inside, his heart was pounding. He hadn't even met the girl yet, and already, he felt like he was failing. What if she laughed at him? What if she stormed out? What if this whole thing blew up in his face? They walked past tables where women wore sparkling diamond necklaces and men sipped golden champagne. Waiters in crisp black suits glided between tables like dancers. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, throwing glittery lights across the marble floors. This was a world Ethan had grown up in, but tonight, he felt like an outsider. Finally, the hostess stopped at a table near a giant window that overlooked the city. The lights of New York glittered like 1,000 tiny stars. At the table sat a young woman. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't like the other women in the room. No heavy makeup. No flashy jewelry. No giant designer bag sitting at her feet. Just a simple ash-gray gown that hugged her body gently, showing elegance without shouting for attention. Her dark, soft curls fell over her shoulders, and her warm brown eyes lit up when she saw them approaching. But for just a second, just a tiny second, a flash of confusion crossed her face. She looked at Thomas and Ethan. At their worn clothes. At their dusty shoes. At their tired smiles. And Ethan could see it. She was surprised. Maybe even a little disappointed. His heart twisted painfully. Was she judging them? Would she walk away? Thomas pulled out a chair for his son and gave him a nod. Sit, Ethan. Let's see what happens next. Slowly, feeling the heavy weight of every eye in the room, Ethan pulled out the chair across from the young woman. She smiled politely, but it wasn't a fake smile like the hostess had given them. It was shy. Curious. Maybe even kind. Thomas sat down next to Ethan, flashing her a cheerful grin. Hi there. You must be Maya. She nodded, her voice soft and a little nervous. Yes. You must be Mr. Blake. And Ethan, right? Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The waiter appeared, holding a fancy menu and looking very uncomfortable. He handed Maya her menu with a big smile, but when he turned to Ethan and Thomas, he hesitated like he wasn't sure they could afford anything on the list. Thomas chuckled quietly under his breath. Don't worry, he whispered to Ethan. This is the fun part. But Ethan wasn't so sure. He felt like crawling under the table. Maya picked up her menu, glancing at them again. Then she did something unexpected. Instead of making a rude comment. Instead of frowning. Instead of leaving. She smiled. A real smile. And she said, I'm so happy you both came. I was really nervous about tonight. Ethan blinked. Was she serious? She wasn't judging them. Before he could say a word, the waiter cleared his throat loudly. Can I get you all something to drink? He said, trying not to sound annoyed. Maya turned to Ethan and Thomas. What would you two like? She asked kindly, as if their clothes didn't matter at all. Thomas smiled wide. Ethan felt a tiny spark of hope inside his chest. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be a disaster after all. But just as they all reached for the drink menu, something shocking happened. Someone stood up from the table next to them, a rich-looking man in a shiny blue suit, and pointed right at them, shouting. Hey! You two don't belong here. This place is for real customers. The whole restaurant gasped. All eyes turned back toward them. Maya's face paled. Ethan's heart stopped. And in that one terrible moment, everything was about to change. The whole restaurant froze again. Forks stopped midair. Glasses clinked softly as nervous hands lowered them back to the table. Every head turned toward them, toward Thomas, Ethan, and Maya. The man who shouted wore a shiny, dark blue suit and a thick gold chain around his neck. His hair was slicked back with so much gel it almost looked wet. His face was red with anger. This isn't some soup kitchen, he barked, jabbing a fat finger toward Thomas and Ethan. Take your trash and leave before you embarrass the rest of us. A few people around the man chuckled meanly. Others just watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Ethan felt his whole face burn with shame. He wanted to disappear under the table. He gripped the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. But Thomas simply smiled. Not a fake, angry smile. A calm, peaceful smile. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with a soft scrape. The restaurant manager, a thin man in a black tuxedo, rushed over, panic written all over his face. Sir, please sit down, he hissed to the man in the blue suit. These gentlemen are guests here. Guests, the man shouted, laughing loudly. They look like beggars. I spend real money here. I won't sit next to them. People started pulling out their phones. Some were recording. Some were pretending not to, but everyone was secretly watching. Thomas raised a hand politely. It's okay, he said to the manager. We'll handle it. He turned to face the man in the blue suit. His voice stayed calm, but there was something strong in it now. Something that made even the loudmouth pause. "Sir," Thomas said. "I believe we have as much right to be here as you do. But if my appearance makes you uncomfortable, I'll happily buy your meal tonight, as an apology for disturbing you." The room gasped. Even the waiter's jaw dropped. The man in the blue suit opened his mouth, then shut it again, confused. Maya stood up quickly. Her hands were trembling a little, but her voice was steady. "They are my guests," she said loudly enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "If you have a problem with them, you have a problem with me." Ethan stared at her. He hadn't expected that. Not at all. A warm feeling filled his chest, hope, respect, maybe something even stronger. The man in the blue suit grunted and sat down heavily in his chair, mumbling under his breath. The manager gave Thomas an apologetic look, bowing slightly, and rushed away to calm the other guests. Slowly, Thomas and Ethan sat back down. Maya smiled at them, a real, soft smile. "I'm sorry about that," she said. "Some people just can't see past appearances." Thomas chuckled. "That's life sometimes," he said, winking at Ethan. "But it's how people react that shows their true heart." Ethan nodded slowly, still staring at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. This wasn't just some pretty face. This was someone brave. Someone kind. Someone real. The waiter scurried back, looking ashamed. Can I get you something to drink now?" he asked, much more polite than before. Maya smiled brightly. "Yes, please. I'll have a lemonade." "What about you two?" Ethan found his voice again. "Same here," he said. Thomas nodded too. Lemonade all around. As the waiter rushed off, Maya leaned forward slightly, her eyes sparkling. "So," she said, "tell me about yourselves. What do you do?" Ethan's mouth opened, then froze. This was the tricky part. They had agreed to keep their real identities secret. If he said he was rich, if he mentioned the family business, it would ruin the whole point of the test. Thomas jumped in smoothly. "We're in construction," he said casually. "Small jobs. Nothing fancy." Maya nodded thoughtfully, not looking disappointed at all. "That's cool," she said warmly. "Hardworking people are the best kind." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The lemonade arrived, and they all clinked glasses. "To new beginnings," Thomas said with a grin. They all laughed and sipped their drinks. For the first time that night, Ethan relaxed. He told Maya funny stories about growing up, about fixing old cars with his dad, about working odd jobs during summer vacations. Maya listened with wide, excited eyes. She told them about her dream to open her own bakery someday, about her love for books, and about how she was working 2 jobs to pay for college. Every word she spoke made Ethan like her more. Not because she was trying to impress him, but because she wasn't trying at all. She was just, real. Honest. And brave. Hours seemed to pass like minutes. The restaurant around them faded away. The fancy chandeliers, the rude stairs, the sparkling dresses, none of it mattered anymore. It was just the 3 of them, laughing, sharing stories, and feeling like they had known each other forever. But just when it seemed like the night was going perfectly, Thomas leaned back in his chair, smiling. "Maya," he said, "there's something we should probably tell you." Maya blinked, setting down her glass. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan's heart started pounding again. Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the doors of the restaurant burst open. 2 men in black suits and sunglasses stormed in, looking around frantically. "Mr. Blake," one of them shouted across the room. "We've been looking for you. There's an urgent situation at the company headquarters." The whole restaurant gasped again. Phones came out. People began whispering. Maya's eyes widened. She stared at Thomas. She stared at Ethan. Wait, what company? She asked, her voice small. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Not like this. And at that moment, Maya realized they weren't who they said they were. Her smile faded. Her hands slowly dropped from the table. She leaned back in her chair, confusion and hurt flashing across her face. And in that awful, crushing moment, everything they had built that night started to crumble. The restaurant was dead silent again. The two men in black suits, clearly bodyguards, stood stiffly by the entrance, scanning the room. They looked serious, urgent, and very, very official. Thomas let out a slow sigh, the kind that made Ethan's stomach drop. Maya stared at them, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with confusion. You're not just construction workers, are you? She asked slowly, her voice shaking just a little. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at his father, silently begging him to fix it. Thomas gave a small, almost sad smile. Maya, listen, he began. But Maya shook her head quickly. Who are you? Why did you lie to me? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was full of hurt. Real hurt. The kind that stings more than anger. The fancy guests, still pretending to eat, kept glancing over, pretending they weren't eavesdropping, but everyone was listening. Everyone. Thomas leaned forward, speaking gently. Maya, we didn't come here to trick you. We just needed to know if you treat us the same without knowing about the money, the name, the fame. Ethan finally found his voice, and it cracked a little when he said. I just wanted to meet someone real. Not someone who wanted me for the money or the last name. Maya blinked hard, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked at Thomas, then at Ethan. Then at the bodyguard still standing awkwardly by the door. Money, she repeated quietly. Fame. Thomas nodded slowly. I'm Thomas Blake. I own Blake Enterprises. We build most of the skyscrapers you see in this city. Maya's mouth opened slightly. Blake Enterprises. She had walked past their giant building every day on her way to work. She had seen their name on half the construction sites in town. Blake Enterprises wasn't just big, it was huge. Thomas Blake was famous. On magazine covers. In news articles. Known everywhere. And Ethan. So you're rich, she whispered. Ethan gave a weak, almost guilty smile. Yeah. Pretty rich. Maya leaned back in her chair, as if she needed more space to breathe. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly. Thomas reached out gently across the table. Please, Maya. Don't be mad. We just needed to see your heart. And you proved tonight that you have a beautiful one. Maya stared at his hand, but didn't take it. She bit her lip hard, clearly fighting 1,000 emotions at once. I don't even know what to think, she said softly. You lied to me. Even if it was for a reason, it was still a lie. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. He had felt a connection with her, real, powerful, and rare. But now it was slipping through his fingers. He wanted to fix it. He had to fix it. Maya, he said urgently. Everything I told you about me, about my dreams, my childhood, my hobbies, that was all true. I didn't fake any of that. The only thing I didn't tell you, was my last name and my bank account. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. But all she found was a young man, scared, desperate, and honest. Her lips trembled as she spoke. I need time to think. Before Ethan could answer, the manager rushed over, looking frantic. Mr. Blake, please, we have your car ready outside. It's best if you leave now, the press just showed up. Someone tipped them off. Outside the restaurant windows, flashing lights were already appearing. Paparazzi. Reporters. Chaos. Thomas stood up quickly, signaling the bodyguards. Ethan looked at Maya, helpless. "Please, can we talk after this? Please." Maya didn't answer. She just sat there, staring down at her trembling hands. Thomas gently grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him toward the door. "Give her time, son," he whispered. "If she's really the one, she'll come back." But Ethan wasn't so sure anymore. They hurried through the restaurant, heads down, past flashing camera lights and shouting reporters. The bodyguards shielded them as they climbed into a black SUV waiting outside. As the car sped away into the night, Ethan looked back through the rear window. And saw Maya still sitting there alone at the table, her head bowed, her hands covering her face. The sparkling city lights blurred through his tears. He had found someone real. And he might have lost her, forever. The city lights flashed by as the SUV raced through the streets. Inside the car, it was silent. Thomas sat beside Ethan, checking his phone every few seconds, answering urgent messages from his company. The bodyguards whispered quietly in the front seat, discussing routes to avoid the reporters. But Ethan just stared out the window. Watching the buildings blur into streaks of light. Feeling like a giant hole had opened up in his chest. He kept seeing her face. Maya's face. The way her smile had faded. The hurt in her eyes. The way she couldn't even look at him at the end. "I ruined it," he whispered under his breath. "I ruined everything." Thomas finally put down his phone and turned toward his son. "Ethan," he said gently. "You didn't ruin anything. You gave her the truth. What she does with it, that's up to her heart." Ethan shook his head. "But what if I never see her again? What if she thinks I'm just another spoiled rich kid playing games?" Thomas smiled sadly. "If she truly saw you tonight, the real you, she'll come back. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But real hearts, they find their way home." Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The city that had once felt so alive now looked cold and empty. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Maya sat frozen at the table. Her lemonade sat untouched. Her hands twisted in her lap. Guests around her whispered and gossiped. Some even stared openly, wondering what had happened. But Maya didn't hear them. Not really. Her mind was spinning too fast. They lied. They hid everything. But they also treated her with kindness, with respect. And they had faced public humiliation for her, without even getting angry. Her heart pulled in two directions. She thought about her past, how many people had hurt her by pretending to be something they weren't. Friends who lied. Family members who abandoned her when life got hard. She had promised herself she would never let anyone fool her again. And yet, tonight didn't feel like a trick. It felt like a test. One she didn't even realize she was taking. Maya's hands stopped trembling. She stood up slowly. She didn't know what she was going to do yet. But she knew one thing. She needed to find out the full truth, not just part of it. The next day was cold and gray. Ethan sat by the giant window in his father's penthouse, staring down at the city streets far below. He hadn't slept. Not even a minute. His phone sat on the table beside him, silent. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. Every time it buzzed, he jumped, hoping it was Maya. But it was always someone else, reporters, friends, people from the company. Thomas came into the room, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Ethan without a word. Ethan took it numbly. "You can't just sit here forever," Thomas said gently, sitting across from him. "You have a life to live." Ethan shook his head. "I don't care about the company. I don't care about the money. None of it matters if. He trailed off, swallowing the lump in his throat. Thomas sighed. Son, I taught you to be strong. To fight for what matters. If she's the one, fight for her. Ethan looked up, a tiny spark lighting behind his tired eyes. How? He whispered. I don't even know where she is. Before Thomas could answer, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. One of the bodyguards quickly went to check. Through the peephole, he saw a small figure standing outside, clutching something in her hands. The guard turned back to Thomas and Ethan, looking surprised. It's a young woman, he said. She's asking for Ethan. Ethan's heart stopped. He jumped to his feet so fast he almost knocked over the coffee mug. Thomas smiled and gave him a nod. Go, he said simply. Ethan ran to the door and yanked it open. There she was. Maya. She stood there in a simple hoodie and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her cheeks pink from the cold wind. She was holding something, a small paper bag, crumpled from being clutched so tightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya took a deep breath and said, Can I come in? Ethan stepped aside quickly, nodding like crazy. She walked in, looking around awkwardly at the fancy marble floors, the giant paintings, the sweeping staircase. Wow, she whispered, almost to herself. You weren't kidding about the rich part. Ethan gave a weak laugh, his heart pounding. Maya. I'm so sorry. For everything. I never wanted to lie. I just. She held up a hand to stop him. Her eyes were serious, but not angry. Let me talk first, she said. He shut his mouth and nodded. Maya looked down at the crumpled paper bag in her hands. She smoothed it out a little, then held it out to him. This is for you, she said. Ethan took it carefully, confused. Inside was a single chocolate chip cookie. Homemade. Still warm. I was baking this morning, Maya said softly, thinking about everything. About you. About last night. Ethan blinked, not sure where this was going. Maya bit her lip. You hurt me, she said honestly. Not because you're rich. But because you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Ethan looked down, ashamed. But. She continued, you also showed me something I've never seen before. Humility. Kindness. Courage. He looked up slowly, hope flickering inside him. Maya smiled, a tiny, shy smile. So here's the deal, she said. If you're still willing. I'm willing to give this a real chance. No lies. No secrets. Just two people figuring it out together. Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. Then he laughed, a real, joyful laugh that filled the room. He grabbed the cookie carefully, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the world. Deal, he said, his voice breaking with happiness. Maya laughed too, and for the first time in what felt like forever, everything felt right. But just as they both started to relax, to smile wider. The doorbell rang again. And this time, when the bodyguard checked the peephole, his face went pale. Sir, he said urgently, turning to Thomas and Ethan. There's someone else here, and you need to see this immediately. Ethan frowned, confused. Maya turned toward the door, curious. The bodyguard opened the door wide. And standing there, smirking coldly in a sharp blue suit, was the man from the restaurant. The one who had humiliated them. The one who had shouted at them in front of everyone. Hello, Mr. Blake, he said smoothly. We need to talk about your son. And about your company. Ethan's heart sank. Maya gasped. Thomas's eyes narrowed. And in that terrible moment, they realized this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The air inside the penthouse turned ice cold. The man from the restaurant, slick hair, shiny blue suit, gold chain flashing under the lights, stepped inside without even waiting for an invitation. Two more men in dark suits followed him, carrying briefcases. Their faces were serious, almost grim. Thomas stood up slowly, his face calm but his eyes sharp like steel. Ethan moved protectively closer to Maya, who clutched her hands nervously. The man gave a fake, oily smile. "Allow me to introduce myself properly this time," he said smugly. "Name's Victor Kane. CEO of Kane Holdings." Thomas gave a polite nod. "I know who you are." His voice was like a warning. Victor chuckled. "Good. Saves time." He tossed a folder onto the coffee table. Papers spilled out, official documents, contracts, financial reports. "You see," Victor said, circling the room like a shark. "I've been trying to buy out Blake Enterprises for months. Quietly. Nicely. But you didn't return my calls." He stopped right in front of Thomas, smirking. "Then last night happened. The little, poor man, stunt. And guess what?" He leaned closer. "Now the media thinks you're unstable. Mocking the rich, playing games. Investors are nervous. Stocks are dropping." Ethan's stomach twisted painfully. Maya looked between them, confused but worried. "So here's the deal," Victor said, straightening his jacket. "Sell me Blake Enterprises. Cheap. Before your empire crumbles around you." The room was silent for a long, heavy moment. Even the bodyguard seemed frozen. Thomas didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared at Victor with an unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke, voice low and steady. "Get out of my house." Victor's smile faded a little. "You really want to do this the hard way?" he hissed. Thomas took a step forward, his presence filling the room like a storm rolling in. "If you think you can bully me, you're even dumber than you look." Victor's face twisted in anger. He pointed at Ethan. "And what about him?" he snarled. "Your little heir. Think he's ready to run a sinking ship? Think your fancy poor boy act is gonna save you when the lawsuits start pouring in?" Ethan stepped forward without thinking. His voice rang out, strong and clear. "We don't scare easy," he said. "And we don't sell out." Maya's heart swelled with pride as she watched Ethan stand tall. This wasn't the scared, unsure boy she had met at the restaurant. This was a man, a real one. Victor laughed coldly. "Fine. Have it your way." He snapped his fingers at his men. "Let's go. They'll come crawling back soon enough." With that, Victor and his team stormed out, slamming the door behind them so hard the walls shook. Silence fell again. Thomas turned slowly toward Ethan and Maya. For the first time all night, there was a hint of tiredness in his eyes. "That man isn't bluffing," he said quietly. "The next few weeks are going to be a war." Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm ready," he said. "Whatever it takes, Dad. I'm ready." Thomas smiled, proud, fierce. He clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I believe you." Then he looked at Maya, who stood there, small but strong. "And you, Maya," Thomas said kindly. "I know you didn't sign up for this kind of chaos. I won't blame you if you walk away now." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Ethan's heart clenched. He wanted to beg her to stay. But he knew, he couldn't force her. She had to choose for herself. Maya looked at Thomas. Then at Ethan. And she smiled. A real, brave, beautiful smile. "I didn't fall for your money," she said simply. "I fell for your hearts." She reached out and took Ethan's hand. Firm. Strong. Sure. If there's a storm coming, she said softly. Then we ride it out together. Ethan laughed, half in disbelief, half in overwhelming joy. He pulled her into a hug, squeezing her tightly, feeling like he was finally home. Thomas wiped at his eye and grumbled something about dust in the air, but everyone knew better. The family wasn't just blood now. It was something deeper. Stronger. Built not on money. Not on fame. But on truth. And love. 6 months later. The newspapers screamed with headlines. Victor Kane arrested for fraud. Blake Enterprises stock soars after scandal exposed. Turns out, Victor had been cheating investors for years. Trying to crash companies to buy them out cheap. And the Blakes? They weathered the storm, together. Stronger than ever. Ethan proposed to Maya in a tiny bakery she opened herself, funded not by his money, but by her own hard work and savings. And when he got down on one knee with a simple gold band instead of a flashy diamond, Maya cried anyway. Because she didn't care about the ring. She cared about the boy who had once pretended to be poor. Just to find someone who loved him for who he really was. And now. They had it all. Not because of wealth. But because they never gave up on the only thing that really mattered. Each other. If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.